Is by picking a school, I mean, it seems like a good place to look for the kinds of epidemiological questions about transmission within a school, but is it a good model for social networks in general? Because it seems like you're more likely to get the Erlenmeyer Flask type of situation where everybody's passing everybody in the hallway every day, as opposed to what would happen if you looked at, you know, how the disease spreads from going home and who gets contacted at home, and is it, and I wonder if that would affect your conclusion about whether or not social networks obey power law relationship.
Now, note that I didn't say that social networks don't, right? What I said is that the school networks don't, right? And I think that a key here is and I think that this is the anthropological sensibility coming in here, is thinking hard about what exactly the social relation that defines your network is, because that matters. There isn't a one-size-fits-all to human social networks. Right, and unfortunately, I think you see that in the literature, that, oh, well, human social networks are like this. Well, there are lots of different social networks, and they depend, I think, very sensitively on social context, on environmental context, on the type of relation that you're talking about. I agree. I mean, we would love to know what happens when people go home. Right, and so you'll notice that red, the absentee data, right, there's a big break in there. There's a big break in there because it was a weekend, right, and we don't know what happened over the weekend. Can't do it with wireless sensor networks, right? They're only going to work in a well-defined sort of closed population. So so a lot of people who are looking at small kids, like in freely forming groups in daycare centers and kindergartens, are really interested in them. You know, in an open population, it would be very, very difficult to do.
Do you think the networks would look less Gaussian if you weren't sampling within a module? Because I mean, under your terminology, the school is essentially a module.
It's possible, right? I don't actually know. I mean, and I think that the key here is that, you know, these power law networks form when there's very little cost to the formation of a social relationship. And as you add costs to network to tie formation, then that tends to trim off those very high. You know, if having 1,000 ties, you know, tallies up your cost column as well as whatever your benefit is, then, you know, you're less likely to form that 1,000th tie, right?
Jamie, I was wondering, on the networks that you observe with this approach, how they compare with the networks that have been observed with other data collection efforts like the National Longitudinal Survey of Adolescent Health. Yeah, you remember Ted Mao? Has done some stuff.
Sure.
Do they have the same?
Well, so it's tricky because AdHealth, of course, asks you to name your 5 best male and female friends, and so they're necessarily truncated.
Right.
And so we don't know if these look like them or not. These aren't friends, right? Our relation here is friends with. Our relation is within 3-meter face-to-face proximity with, right? So it's a great question. I have no idea what the answer is.
I'll ask my question now. So the simulations that you were doing, they all start with one infected person. Does that seem, I mean, I would have thought that kids have brothers and sisters and that there'd be a lot of, you know, so somebody's got a 2-year-old brother that is getting sick just like you are, and that there'd be this continual flow of infected people and now.
So these simulations are serving, you know, an end in that we can ask the question: what does the individual's sort of marginal graph theoretic relationship do to the final outcome of the epidemic? I mean, obviously, in terms of realism, you know, despite what mathematical epidemiologists may say, right, epidemics are typically seeded by, you know, a larger propagule than just a single individual.
So won't that average out the effect of the characteristics of the
Yeah, no, it will. And the thing is that these characteristics don't have that big of an impact, particularly at this very fine scale anyways, right? So I think it actually makes the point even more strongly to think about that averaging. That's a good point.
We have time for one more question.
This one over here.
So there may be constraints of the institution that you're working with, but wouldn't this claim about cost to the social interaction predict that when you use the 20-second intervals, you have more of a long tail than when you use the larger time intervals?
Sure.
And did you have that pattern?
No, I mean that's what they look like. Yeah. So, in the literature, we know that when you add cost to forming a relationship, that you truncate the very long tails. That doesn't necessarily mean that the only way that you can get truncated tails is if there's a cost. And I think that here it's really the constraints imposed by the social space, and they're time constraints. You can only form so many. And you think about something like these extremely long power tail degree distributions, things like internet number of links to an internet site. Right? That's a cumulative thing that happens over a very long period of years. So temporal scale is very important in this.
I was just wondering, want to look at the graph again where you have it mapped out by time of day.
By
like lunchtime is your sort of nice natural experiment about how kids are, what this thing looks
less
like.
structured.
Yeah.
Is it it's a cafeteria that they all go to at the same time?
It's California, right? So there's a cafeteria, but there's also there's a nice courtyard, right? There's sushi. There actually is. And so it's a fairly big and fairly open space.
They must cluster more.
Yeah. No, it looks more like a cocktail party.
I mean, you got a lot of data.
Yeah. Well, we also, the thing I didn't tell you at all about is that we also have we had fixed points. So we had beacons that emitted a higher energy signal, so that we can actually fix people spatially within the school. We haven't begun to analyze those data yet. The school is a little. So for IRB reasons, we haven't looked at any of our covariates of nodal covariates, and we're not going to for a couple of years. And the space, and I mean, this raises lots of very difficult ethical questions. When you have social networks and you have them, isolated in space, and you've got covariate information that allows, deductive disclosure or whatever. So someday, though.
Okay,
Thanks.